The galaxy was vast, filled with countless worlds, endless star systems, and civilizations that had risen and fallen across the ages. Among them were empires known for their power, kingdoms that ruled entire sectors, and tribes that lived among the asteroids. Yet no matter where one traveled, one name had become famous in every place. Carried by whispers and bold voices alike, the name of Princess Arya. Arya was not like the rulers of old who inherited thrones without earning respect. She was known as a warrior, a fighter who trained from her earliest years and never accepted defeat. Stories spread of her victories in war, how she had stood alone against invaders and broken their lines with her own strength. Her people, tall and fierce, were already respected across the stars, but she was something more. Many saw her as unmatched, as almost untouchable. But Arya was not satisfied. She declared to the galaxy that she would not marry any noble by arrangement, nor accept any suitor by bloodline. If someone wished to stand by her side, they must prove it. She announced her challenge in a speech that traveled across every known channel, broadcasted to stations and ships, carried by traders and envoys. Her voice was firm and commanding as it echoed from every screen. I am Arya, daughter of the Iron Throne. I will marry the one who defeats me in combat. Step forward if you dare, warriors of the stars. Show me your strength or be silent forever. The galaxy erupted with noise after her words. Some laughed, saying it was a game of pride. Others grew excited, believing this was their chance at glory. Thousands of warriors, champions of their races, gladiators of renown, and soldiers carrying the pride of their people began to travel toward her world. It became known as the Trial of Arya. Her world was prepared for them. The grand arena of Valora was opened, a structure so massive it could seat millions. It was shaped like a great ring of stone and metal, its walls carved with ancient markings, its floor strong enough to endure the blows of titans. Ships lined the skies as travelers arrived from distant systems. Merchants set up stalls outside the arena, selling food, banners, and charms, said to bring luck. The entire planet seemed alive with noise and expectation, day by day. The challengers entered the arena. The first was a giant from the ice worlds, taller than 3 men, carrying an axe that could cut through steel. He roared as he charged, but Arya struck him down within minutes. The crowd cheered. The second was a warrior of fire, his body glowing with heat, his armor forged from volcanic stone. He launched waves of flame. But Arya dashed through the fire and ended the battle with a single strike. One after another, challengers came. Some were swift as shadows, others strong enough to break boulders with their fists. Some used weapons powered by strange energies, while others relied on their own flesh and blood. Yet none could match her. Every duel ended with Arya standing tall and her challenger lying in defeat, as days turned into weeks. The legend of her challenge grew. Songs were sung in taverns across the galaxy about the princess who no one could defeat. Stories reached the ears of young warriors who dreamed of being the one to claim her hand. Entire fleets carried groups of challengers, and still, they all failed. In the stands of the arena, the crowd's cheers grew louder with every match. Some came only to watch her skill, admiring the beauty of her movement, the sharpness of her mind, and the control she had over every battle. Yet as the number of defeated warriors rose into the hundreds, and then the thousands, whispers began to grow. Is there no one strong enough? They asked, will anyone ever stand against her? It seemed impossible that any being in the galaxy could defeat her. And yet, on the last day of the open challenge, when the announcer's voice echoed across the arena, calling for any remaining challengers, only one figure stepped forward. He was not a giant. He was not glowing with fire, nor covered in strange armor of alien design. He was human. His name was Dawn. The crowd stared in disbelief. Among the races of the galaxy, humans were often seen as weak. They had no claws, no scales, no towering size or natural weapons. Their strength was average compared to others, their speed unremarkable, their endurance limited. Many thought of them as survivors, clever at trade or invention. but never as warriors of legend. The crowd erupted in laughter. "Is this a joke?" shouted one voice. "A human? Against her?" cried another. "Send him home before he gets hurt." But Dan kept walking. He wore simple armor, not decorated with gold or jewels, only polished steel-shaped to protect without slowing him down. He carried a short blade at his side and a round shield strapped to his arm. His movements were steady, his face calm. When he reached the center of the arena, he looked up at Princess Arya. She studied him with sharp eyes, her stance strong and ready. She had faced hundreds of warriors before, each one filled with pride, rage, or ambition. But this man's eyes held something different. Not arrogance, not fear. Curiosity stirred within her. "Human," she said, her voice echoing in the arena. "You know who I am? You know what I have done? And yet you walk forward. Why?" Dan did not bow, nor did he raise his voice to challenge her. He spoke simply, his words clear. "Because you asked if there was no one strong enough," he said. "And I cannot remain silent when I know strength is not only in muscle or bone." The crowd grew restless, some mocking, others falling quiet as his words carried across the arena. Arya tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "You believe you can defeat me?" "I believe I can stand," Dan answered. "And sometimes that is enough." A strange silence fell. Even those who laughed before began to watch with new eyes. The duel had not yet begun. But already something was different. For the first time in all the weeks of battle, the challenge did not feel like one more warrior seeking glory. It felt like something greater. The arena waited, breath held, as the human and the princess faced each other. The true trial was about to begin. The great arena of Valora had seen countless battles. Its stones had been stained with the sweat of giants, the sparks of plasma blades, and the dust of collapsing shields. It had heard the roars of beasts and the cries of warriors who had come from across the stars, but never before had it seen what it saw now. A lone human stood in the center of the arena, facing Princess Arya. His name was Dan. He looked almost ordinary compared to the warriors who had fought before him. No glowing aura of energy, no towering size, no massive weapon forged from rare elements. Just a man in simple armor, carrying a short blade and a small shield. The crowd did not stay silent for long. As soon as the announcer repeated his name, the laughter began. It echoed like rolling thunder across the seats of the arena. "A human. Here? Against her?" shouted one alien with 4 arms, slapping 2 of them together in amusement. "Send him back to his little world before he gets broken," cried another. A massive reptilian figure who had once challenged Arya and fallen in seconds. Others joined in, pointing at him, mocking his height, his plain armor, his simple face. To them, it was as if a farmer had stepped into a storm with nothing but a stick. Dan did not react. He walked forward at the same steady pace as before, his eyes on Arya. His steps did not falter, even when the laughter grew louder. From her raised platform, Arya watched him carefully. She could hear the mockery, feel the waves of disbelief rolling through the crowd. Yet she did not laugh. Something in the way he walked caught her attention. There was no fear in his face, no hesitation in his movement. He looked like a man who had already accepted what he must do. The announcer, dressed in flowing silver robes, raised his voice above the crowd. Challenger Dan of the human race steps forward to face Princess Arya. Let the trial begin, if Her Highness accepts. Arya lifted her spear, its metal glinting under the arena lights. The crowd hushed for a moment, waiting for her decision. She studied Dan. "You know they mock you," she said, her voice carrying across the stones. "I hear them," Dan replied calmly. "They believe you have no chance." "They may be right," he said. "But I did not come because of what they believe." Her eyes narrowed. She leaned forward slightly. "Then why are you here?" Dan lifted his shield, not as a boast, but as a simple gesture. "Because strength is not what they think it is. You asked if there was no one strong enough. I may not be stronger than you, but I am strong enough to stand." For a moment, silence filled the arena. The words were simple, but the tone in which he spoke them was steady and unshaken. Then the laughter returned, though this time it was less certain. Some still mocked, but others began to lean forward, curious. Arya rose from her seat and leaped down into the arena floor with a grace that made the stones tremble under her landing. She towered above Dawn, her armor gleaming, her spear like a pillar of steel. She looked like a goddess of battle compared to the plain man before her. The announcer stepped back quickly, raising his hands. The duel is set. Princess Arya faces Dan of the human race. The crowd roared again, excitement mixing with disbelief. Some cheered for the princess as always, but a few voices, faint yet clear, began to call the human's name not in support but in daring curiosity. Dan, show us if you can last a minute. Let's see if humans can even bleed the same as us. Dan did not turn toward them. He fixed his eyes on Arya. Arya twirled her spear, the air humming with its movement. She stepped forward, her voice low enough that only he could hear. If you stand before me, human, you must accept the rules. I will not hold back. I would not want you to, Dawn replied. Something flickered across her face, a mix of surprise and interest. The duel began. With a sudden burst, Arya lunged. Her spear cut through the air like lightning. Dan raised his shield, and the strike rang out like thunder. The force pushed him back across the stones, his boots scraping, but he did not fall. He dug his feet in and held. The crowd gasped. Few ever withstood her first strike without collapsing. Arya spun, bringing her spear around for a sweeping blow. Dan crouched, raising his shield again, letting the strike glance off its surface. Sparks flew, and his arm shook from the power behind it. But he stayed standing. Again the crowd reacted, some gasping, others laughing harder. He's only blocking. He has no chance. But others began to watch more carefully. Dan did not move with the speed of the insectoid warriors who darted like shadows. He did not match the sheer power of the giants who had come before. Instead, he moved with steady, measured steps. Every block, every shift of his shield was careful, not wasted. He was not fighting to overpower her. He was fighting to endure. Arya struck again and again, each blow strong enough to crack stone. Dan's shield absorbed them, his body sliding back. But he stayed upright. Minutes passed. The laughter began to fade. The crowd had expected him to fall within seconds, crushed by the first strike or the second. But Dan was still standing. His shield was dented, his arm trembled, but his eyes remained calm. Fixed on the princess before him, Arya paused, lowering her spear for a brief moment. Sweat glistened on her brow, not from exhaustion, but from the rising awareness that this was different. Why do you keep standing? She asked him, her voice quieter now. Don raised his shield again, though his arm ached. Because you asked if there was no one strong enough. I want to show you that strength is not only in the one who strikes, but also in the one who endures. The words carried again through the arena. This time, no laughter followed. The crowd was silent, watching the human who refused to fall. Arya straightened, tightening her grip on her spear. Her eyes gleamed with a new light, no longer only the fire of battle, but something sharp respect, or perhaps curiosity that cut deeper than her spear ever could. The duel was not finished. But already the story was changing. The princess who had crushed thousands now faced a human who, by all reason, should not even have lasted a breath against her. Yet here he was, shield raised, eyes steady, refusing to give ground beyond what he must. The crowd, once full of laughter now, leaned forward in silence, waiting for what would come next. The arena was no longer laughing. What had begun as a joke turned into a silence, heavy with wonder. Thousands of eyes remained fixed on the human who refused to fall. Dan stood with his dented shield raised, short blade still sheathed at his side. His breath was heavy, his arm ached from the force of Arya's attacks, but his eyes were calm. He did not shake with fear. He did not look for escape. He stood ready, waiting for her next strike. Princess Arya felt her heart quicken, not with anger, but with a strange excitement she had not known in years. She had crushed giants and champions, fought warriors who claimed to be legends, but none had stood before her like this. Strength alone had always failed against her, but this human did not fight with strength alone. He fought with patience. He fought with endurance. She gripped her spear tighter. "Do you think you can win by blocking forever?" Don shook his head slowly. "No, but winning is not always what matters most." The word struck her more deeply than she expected. She narrowed her eyes and spun her spear once again. If he wished to stand, she would test how long he could endure. She attacked. The spear moved like a storm, striking from above, then sweeping low, then thrusting forward with lightning speed. Each blow would have ended the fight for almost any other challenger. But Dan's shield rose again and again, catching the strikes, turning them aside. He bent his knees to absorb the force, shifted his stance to keep balance, and moved his body just enough to lessen the impact. The crowd gasped at every clash. Sparks flew with each strike, echoing like thunder in the arena. Arya's movements were fast and powerful, her armor shining as she pressed forward. Dan looked almost fragile beside her, yet he did not break. Minutes turned into long moments. The air itself seemed tense. As if the arena stones held their breath, Don finally drew his short blade, not in a bold attack, but in a small movement, slashing quickly at Arya's arm as her spear swung past. The blade barely scratched her armor, leaving only the faintest mark. But it was the first time in the entire challenge that anyone had touched her. The crowd erupted in noise. He struck her. Someone shouted. A human drew her blood. Another cried, though it was only a scratch. Arya's eyes widened slightly. Not because the strike hurt, but because of the meaning behind it. He had waited. He had studied. He had used the one moment when her guard was lowest to test his reach. It was not strength that gave him this chance. It was timing. It was patience. "You watch me," Arya said, circling him. "Yes," Don replied simply. "I learn." The answer was not arrogant. It was honest. Arya felt her lips curve into a smile. For the first time in the long challenge, she was not simply a ruler defending her vow, nor a warrior proving her skill. She felt alive in the fight. She spun her spear and came again. Faster, sharper, driving him back step by step. Dan blocked, dodged, and sometimes allowed the blows to graze his armor, rather than meet them head-on. His shield bore more dents now, his blade chipped slightly at the edge. But his stance remained firm. The crowd no longer mocked. They watched with intensity, their voices rising not in laughter, but in awe. The name Dan began to be whispered, then shouted. Some cheered for him now, though they had mocked only minutes ago. "Stand, human. Stand," voices called. "Show her you will not fall." Dan heard them, but he did not let the noise distract him. His focus stayed on the warrior before him. Arya felt her chest tighten with exhilaration. She drove her spear down hard, shaking the stones under them. Dan's shield cracked slightly from the force, but he steadied it with his arm. His knees bent, his muscles burned, but he refused to kneel. "You are stubborn," Arya said between strikes. "Some call it that," Don replied, breathless. "I call it strength," she laughed. Sound rare for her in battle. Not a mocking laugh, but a laugh filled with respect. For several more minutes, they clashed. Don struck back only when an opening appeared, never wasting energy, never swinging wildly. His strikes were small, quick, designed not to defeat, but to test. To remind her that he was still there, still standing, still fighting. The crowd had never seen such a duel. It was not the overwhelming victory they expected from Arya, nor the swift defeat they expected for the human. It was a battle of will. A battle of spirit. Finally, Arya leaped back, planting her spear in the ground. She raised her hand, signaling for a pause. The announcer, confused, hesitated, then shouted, "The princess calls a halt." The crowd roared in protest and excitement, unsure what was happening. Arya stepped closer to Dan. Her eyes searched his face. "You could fall at any moment, yet you choose to keep going." Dan breathed heavily, sweat running down his brow, but he raised his shield again, even in the pause. His voice was steady. Because you asked if no one was strong enough? I am not stronger than you, but I can show you that strength is not only power, it is the will to endure. It is the choice to stand even when you cannot win. The words carried across the arena. For the second time, silence fell. The crowd felt something shift inside them. They had come to see another easy victory, another display of power. Instead, they saw a human who stood where thousands had fallen. They saw a duel that was not about crushing, but about proving the meaning of strength itself. Arya looked at him for a long time. Then she pulled her spear free and raised it high. "Then show me more," she said, her voice ringing out. "Show me how long a human can stand." The duel began again. The battle raged on, the sound of steel on steel echoing through the arena. Dan's shield finally cracked apart, falling in 2 pieces from his arm. The crowd gasped, thinking he would fall now. But Dan only shifted his grip on his short blade and raised it in both hands. His defense was weaker now, but his spirit burned brighter. Arya struck harder, faster, her movements like a dance of thunder and flame. Dan dodged, twisted, let the strikes graze him, and when he could, he countered with small cuts that reminded her he was still unbroken. The crowd shouted his name now, louder and louder. Dan. 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 The unexpected duel had changed everything. When the sun began to lower in the sky and the arena's lights burned brighter, both fighters stood locked in their stances. Neither had won, neither had fallen. But the meaning was clear to all who watched. Dan, the human, had done what no other could. He had not defeated the princess, but he had endured her storm. He had turned mockery into respect. For the first time, Princess Arya felt that perhaps her challenge had found more than a warrior. It had found an answer. The arena of Valora had never been quieter. Thousands of eyes were fixed on the human standing before Princess Arya. What had begun as mockery had become awe. Every being in the stands leaned forward, holding their breath, watching the duel that was no longer just about strength. Dan, the human, was tired. His short blade had already met countless strikes. His arms burned. His muscles ached from the hours of blocking, dodging and countering. His shield was broken, scattered in pieces across the arena floor. Dust and sweat clung to his skin, and his armor was dented and scratched. Yet he did not stumble. He did not falter. Arya watched him carefully. She had fought countless warriors, creatures whose strength and skill were unmatched. Giants who had crushed entire armies, aliens who moved faster than any eye could follow. None had ever stood before her like this. Not with swords, not with claws, not with weapons of power. Dan was ordinary by all measures, yet extraordinary in his endurance. "You endure far more than anyone should," Arya said. Her voice was calm but carried an edge of surprise. Most would fall long before this moment. Dan lowered his blade slightly but did not relax. "Endurance is a choice," he replied. "It is not about power. It is about refusing to give up when giving up seems easier." Arya tilted her head, studying him. "Then tell me, human, why do you fight? What do you hope to prove?" Dan paused for a moment, considering his words. "I fight because strength is more than muscle. It is the courage to act when others hesitate. It is the patience to learn and the will to continue, even when the outcome seems impossible. You asked if there was no one strong enough. I am here to show you that strength is not only what can break, but also what can endure." The crowd fell silent again. Words traveled across the stands, whispered from one being to another. Many had come expecting to see her crush a weak human. Instead, they witnessed something they had never seen before: a warrior without great power, standing against one of the strongest beings in the galaxy. Refusing to yield, Arya felt a strange stirring inside her. For the first time, she was not merely a fighter in a duel. She was facing a being whose courage challenged her perception of strength itself. The human's patience, endurance, and calm defiance were more powerful than any strike, any weapon, or any physical skill. "You are not like the others," she said, taking a careful step back. None have made me pause like this before. I do not wish to make you pause, Dan answered. I only wish to show you that strength can take many forms. Some are built from muscle and speed, but others are built from heart, mind, and will. Adia lowered her spear slightly, studying him. She could see that he was weary, his movements slower than before, yet his gaze remained unwavering. Many warriors would have already knelt, exhausted and broken. Dan was not broken. He had no weapon powerful enough to harm her greatly, no armor strong enough to protect him fully, yet he had found a way to endure through cleverness. Timing and focus. The crowd began to stir with whispers. Look at him. He is still standing. How can a human endure so much? Perhaps strength is not only what we have always believed, said another. A young alien with scales that shimmered in the arena lights. Arya stepped forward again, her spear ready. She struck, not with all her force, but with precision, testing his reactions. Don dodged and deflected each blow, his movements careful and deliberate. His blade caught the edge of her armor once more, leaving only faint scratches, but enough to prove he was still capable of action. You are clever, she said. You do not fight like the others. You study, wait, and act only when opportunity comes. Because strength is not only what can destroy, Dan replied. It is also what can endure, what can adapt, what can rise even when the odds seem impossible. Arya's eyes narrowed as she circled him. Her mind raced. She had faced thousands of challengers, and none had made her think so deeply about their meaning. Some had fought with brute force, some with speed, some with cunning tricks. None had combined patience, endurance, and cleverness into a single, unbroken form like Dan had. You speak as if strength is more than power, she said, lowering her spear for a moment. Is that what you truly believe? Yes, Dan said simply. Strength is not only what can crush, strength is what can withstand. Strength is what can inspire. And sometimes strength is the courage to stand alone when everyone else has turned away. The crowd had gone quiet again. Some beings shifted in their seats, realizing that the human before them had not only survived the princess's attacks, but had also changed their understanding of strength. Many of the alien warriors who had come to mock him now whispered among themselves, astonished at his courage. Arya moved closer, testing him once again with a series of fast strikes. Dan dodged, blocked, and countered with small, precise movements. His blade was light, but it was effective enough to remind her that he had learned from every strike she made. Every motion he took was thoughtful, every action deliberate. He did not waste energy, nor did he rely solely on his body. His mind guided him, and his will gave him endurance beyond what anyone expected. You endure far more than anyone should, she said again. Watching him closely, I endure because it is necessary, Dan replied. Because to stop would mean to accept weakness. And I do not accept weakness in the face of a challenge. Not when the challenge is worth standing for. Arya paused, lowering her spear fully. For the first time, she considered the human not as a mere challenger, but as a being worthy of respect. He had no grand weapons, no superhuman speed, no immense strength. Yet he had endured her attacks, learned from them, and continued to rise each time she pressed harder. The realization struck her deeply. Strength was not just measured by power or skill. Strength could be measured by patience, endurance, and the will to stand despite impossible odds. You are more than I expected, she said softly. Few have ever made me pause in this way. You are not the strongest in the galaxy by traditional measures, yet you are strong in ways that few understand. Dan's chest rose and fell as he caught his breath. His arms were sore, his muscles screamed in protest, yet he did not relax completely. His eyes remained steady on Arya, unafraid. I do not claim to be the strongest, he said, but I am here because I can stand. And sometimes standing is the greatest strength of all. Arya smiled faintly, something she rarely allowed herself to show. She raised her spear once more, not in anger, but in challenge. Then let us continue. Show me this strength again. Show me the courage to stand even when no one else could. Dan raised his blade, gripping it firmly. His arms ached, his armor was battered, but his stance remained firm. The human had no illusions of grandeur. He did not believe he could easily defeat the princess. Yet he knew something greater than physical victory. He could prove that strength took many forms, and that courage and willpower mattered as much as muscle and skill. The duel began again. Arya struck with precision, testing his endurance. But Don moved with careful timing, dodging and countering small openings. The crowd held their breath. Each strike from Arya tested him, but he endured. Each counter reminded her that he was not simply surviving, but learning, adapting, and growing stronger with every movement. Minutes passed like hours. The sun shifted across the sky above the arena, casting long shadows over the duelists. Dan's arms shook from exertion. Sweat streaked his face, but he remained upright. Arya's eyes sparkled with new understanding. Strength was not only power, strength was courage. Strength was endurance. Strength was the ability to rise again and again, no matter how fierce the storm. The crowd began to rise to their feet. They had come to see a display of brute strength and domination. Instead, they witnessed a human standing tall against one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. And in that moment, they understood something new. Strength was more than muscle. Arya lowered her spear slightly and nodded. "You are strong, human. Not in the ways the galaxy expects, but in ways that matter most." Dan breathed heavily, but did not lower his stance. He had not won by defeating her with force. He had not claimed victory by overwhelming skill. He had survived. He had endured. He had stood firm when none expected him to do so. And in that endurance, he had shown the true meaning of strength. The arena of Valora had seen countless battles across centuries. It had been the stage for the strongest of warriors, the most feared champions, and the most cunning strategists. Yet nothing had prepared it for what it witnessed now. Dan. The human stood in the center, battered and exhausted, yet upright. His short blade was nicked, his armor dented, and his muscles trembled with fatigue. Sweat clung to his skin, and dust coated every inch of him. He had endured strikes from one of the strongest beings in the galaxy, and yet he remained standing. Princess Arya approached slowly, her spear lowered. The once laughing crowd now stood in complete silence, their eyes fixed on the two figures in the arena. Every being in the stands, no matter their race, could feel the weight of the moment. What they had come to witness as a simple test of strength had become something far greater. Arya circled him, studying every movement, every reaction. She could see the fatigue in his eyes, yet also a fire that refused to be extinguished. He was not the fastest, nor the strongest in the conventional sense. Yet he had survived, endured, and adapted where others had failed. "You have proven yourself," she said finally, her voice calm but firm. "Not because you struck me down, nor because you wield weapons of great power. You have proven yourself because you have the courage to stand when others would fall, and the will to continue when all hope seems lost." Dan lowered his blade slightly, breathing heavily. "I did not come to prove I could defeat you," he said. "I came because you asked if there was no one strong enough. I only wanted to show you that strength has many forms. Some are in muscle, some are in speed, some are in willpower. And sometimes the strongest one is the one who refuses to give up." Arya's gaze softened. She looked at him with a mixture of respect and curiosity. "You are unlike any challenger I have ever faced," she said. "You fought not to dominate but to endure. You have shown patience, courage, and understanding. You are strong in ways that the galaxy has not measured before." The crowd began to murmur, their voices rising in excitement. Many beings who had mocked him before now whispered in awe, "A human. Who stands against the princess? He is strong in a way we have never understood." Arya raised her hand, signaling the end of the duel. The announcer's voice echoed across the arena, trembling with excitement. "The trial is complete. Princess Arya has spoken. The challenger, Dan of the human race, has proven himself in ways no other has." Dan stood silently, unsure what would come next. He had endured, survived, and stood tall. but he did not expect this. He had come only to show that strength was more than physical power. And now it seemed that his lesson had been understood. Arya stepped closer. Her eyes locked on his, sharp and clear. "Dawn," she said, her voice carrying across the arena. "You have shown me that strength is more than muscle, more than power, more than speed. You have shown me endurance, courage, and wisdom. You have shown me the heart of a warrior." The words seemed to ripple through the air. Dawn could feel the eyes of thousands upon thousands of beings watching him, waiting. He had faced mockery, laughter, disbelief, and now he felt something he had never expected: recognition. Arya continued, "I have sought a partner not for power, not for glory, but for someone who embodies the strength that truly matters. You have shown me that you are capable of standing when no one else would, and for that I choose you." The crowd erupted in a roar so loud it shook the arena walls. Some cheered for the princess, some for the human, and some simply for the meaning of what had just occurred. The galaxy had witnessed something extraordinary. A human man had stepped forward when no one else dared, and he had shown the true meaning of strength. Dan took a cautious step forward. His heart pounded. "Are you choosing me?" he asked. "Yes," Arya replied, her gaze steady. "You have proven that you are strong in ways that matter most. You have endurance, courage, and wisdom. You are the one who has earned the right to stand beside me." The words were simple, yet their meaning was immense. Dan could feel the weight of the moment. He had come alone, a simple human among thousands of the galaxy's mightiest. He had been mocked, underestimated, and yet he had stood. And now, in the light of the arena, he had been recognized. The crowd cheered louder, their voices mixing into a single wave of sound that rolled across the stones. Some beings cried, some laughed, and some simply watched in awe. Across the galaxy, stories of this day would be told for generations, the day a human man proved that strength is not only in power, but in endurance, courage, and will. Arya reached out her hand. Dan hesitated for only a moment before taking it. In that simple gesture, a new bond was formed. Not a bond of domination, not of fear, but of mutual respect and understanding. The princess, who had never yielded now, looked at him not as a challenger, but as an equal. The arena fell silent once more, this time not in suspense, but in reverence. Every being present could feel that they had witnessed something rare and extraordinary. It was not simply a duel or a trial, it was a demonstration of the true nature of strength. Arya addressed the crowd. "Today, you have seen a lesson beyond battle. You have seen that strength is not only in the power to strike, but in the courage to endure, in the will to rise, and the patience to stand firm when all others fall. Dan has shown this to us all. Let his example inspire the galaxy." The crowd roared again, louder than ever. Many beings wept, moved by the courage of a human who had dared to step forward when everyone else had turned away. Some whispered to each other, realizing that the galaxy's understanding of strength had changed forever. Dan and Arya stood together in the center of the arena. Their hands still joined. The sun above cast a golden light across the stones, highlighting the exhaustion on his face and the admiration in hers. The contrast was striking. A human, small in stature compared to the princess, yet unbroken in spirit. A warrior, strong in power. Yet recognizing the strength of another kind, "You have changed my view of the galaxy," Arya said quietly. "You have shown me that even the smallest, seemingly weakest being can stand against giants and endure. You are more than a challenger, Dan. You are a partner." Dan bowed slightly, not in submission, but in respect. "Thank you, princess. I never sought glory. I only wished to show that strength comes in many forms. If I can stand beside you, I will do so with honor and with all that I have." Arya nodded, a small smile crossing her face. "Then we will face the galaxy together, not as ruler and subject, but as equals. You have proven yourself human, and in that, you have earned the right to be here with me." The crowd erupted one final time, cheering for both of them, cheering for the lesson, cheering for the courage that had changed everything. Stories of this day would be told in every corner of the galaxy. The tale of the princess who sought a partner, worthy of her strength, and the human man who dared to stand alone when no one else would. As they left the arena side by side, Dawn and Arya felt the weight of what had just occurred. It was more than a duel, more than a trial. It was a lesson, a recognition, and a bond forged in the fires of challenge. Across the stars, the story would spread, inspiring humans and other species alike. For in a galaxy filled with powerful warriors, it was a simple human who had stepped forward. And it was his endurance, courage, and will that had earned him the right to stand beside a princess, not as a subject, but as an equal. The sun set over Valora, casting long shadows across the arena. The stones, worn by centuries of battles, seemed to hum with the memory of the day. The story of Dan and Princess Arya had begun, and with it, a new understanding of what it truly meant to be strong. Strength was not only power. Strength was courage. Strength was endurance. Strength was standing tall when all others had fallen. And that was the story the galaxy would remember forever.